Everyone knows Peter McCormack. Is there anything from your younger years that you can pinpoint that led you to be what you became?
It's a big question. I don't know what I've become. I had a very normal childhood.
But no child sort of thinks, right, I'm gonna be a Bitcoin guru and I'm gonna buy a football club.
Well, I've got two very normal working class parents. My dad was an engineer, my mum was a nurse. My dad cared about one thing, which was education. So he was a very hard worker, shift worker at the airport, and wanted to send me to a private school, couldn't afford it, and so would take every overtime shift ever available. And this is, anyone knows shift work, it's 12 hours on, 12 hours off, and he would 4 days on, 4 days off. And so he would regularly do 6, 7, 8 days. He sometimes did something called a ghost shift, which is 24 hours. And he did that so he could afford to send me to the school. Unfortunately, I was really shit at school. But I think, weirdly, it helped me in a different way that he didn't expect, in that I was essentially the poor kid in a rich school. We didn't have flashy summer holidays. When we came back after Christmas, everyone had their flashy Christmas presents. I didn't have them. And so I felt in a competitive race with everyone at the school to outperform them, because we didn't have that kind of money. So I started my first business at 14. I had 3 paper rounds. And I was mainly focused on how could I beat the system. But at the same time, I'm very much into punk rock. And so you have to roll in a kind of fuck you attitude with that. It's like, how do I beat this system whilst also not being part of it? So that, I had that. And then, I had a very supportive mother. Unfortunately, she died 7 years ago. It's the reason I got into Bitcoin, weirdly. But like my dad was very traditional, like, do your homework. My mum was just like, look, just do whatever you want to do and just be happy. So it was a great childhood, very happy childhood, and it's just led me to have a very kind of don't care attitude about life. And when I say that, I mean it in a positive way. Is I don't care for authority, and I don't care for doing things the way people tell you to do them. I've just always done things my own way. And weirdly, things have worked out quite well like that.
We're going to have to reel back a couple of minutes there, because you touched on something which I appreciate is a deeply personal matter. But okay. You said the reason you got into Bitcoin was because of your mum's passing.
Yeah. So I mean. I might as well be honest. So I used to work in advertising a long time ago, and anyone knows the advertising industry, pretty much everyone does cocaine, and I used to do cocaine. Sorry, it's just true.
I told you this was worth it.
And then, so one of my friends phoned me up one day, and he was like, have you heard of this website, the Silk Road? I was like, no. It's like you can get mail order cocaine. I was like, really? He was like, yeah, you need this thing called Bitcoin. I was like, what are you on about? So anyway, went down the rabbit hole, and I know it was true. So I used to, rather than meeting somebody outside Tesco's, and hoping you would have something that wasn't just some powdered shit, you would buy from a website that worked. And it worked because it took violence out of the system and took impurities out of the system. And whether you're pro or anti-drugs, I think we can all agree that the prohibition has failed everyone, and we have people now dying from fentanyl overdoses because drug dealers aren't usually the most ethically backbone people. I don't take drugs anymore. It's been about 12 years since I've taken drugs, so don't worry, I've moved on from that. But when my mum got sick with cancer, she had ovarian cancer stage 3B. So not terminal, but didn't look good. And so she survived for 3 years, but towards the end, we wanted to treat her with cannabis oil. It's illegal in our country, and again, I think anyone with half a brain knows this is the cannabis laws we have are decades out of date, and if you want to treat somebody with a plant who has a medical condition, it should be allowed. Unfortunately, it wasn't. And so I said to my dad, I know of these websites where you can buy these things. You need a thing called Bitcoin. And so we bought some Bitcoin and bought some cannabis oil. Unfortunately, it was too late. My mother passed about 12 days later. But I was sat there with this Bitcoin and in between jobs, and went on a new direction from there.
I love this. This is so fascinating. At what point did your dad say, how do you know about these websites?
Well, no. No, he unfortunately, if you... there's a trajectory with cocaine which usually leads in one or two directions. One direction is, oh, this isn't for me, or one of them is, oh, this is for me. And if you're on the it is for me one, you usually end up with a crash, which I did. I ended up in hospital and nearly died. And so he knew all of that, and we went through, obviously, a few discussions about how that happened, and yeah, he was very supportive.
We've only just started, but already I want to know when the biography is coming out, because this is gripping.
I'm not that interested.
Yeah. Well, I think you are. And before we do get into football, I want to look at something else, because it's very of the moment, because we've got Mr. Obnoxious, which launched this week.
Yeah, so...
What's that about?
Well, so about 7 years ago, I started a podcast. As I said, I was in between careers. I just bought some Bitcoin, and on my drug recovery, I'd met a podcaster, a guy called Rich Roll, really cool guy, and he invited me out to see him in LA, so I did, and I just said, I like your life. It seems pretty cool. You just talk to people and earn money. He said, yeah. So I was like, how do you do it? So he told me, and I started a podcast 7 years ago called What Bitcoin Did. It became... Which
is what you're probably most known for among the group.
Unless they're crypto people. And so the podcast did quite well. I was very fortunate. It became the biggest show dedicated to Bitcoin. I've traveled around the world in 860 shows. But I've got to the point now where it's traveling life, it's fun at first, and then anyone who's traveled a lot for work knows it's basically shit living in hotels and flights. So I wanted to move it back to the UK, because I did most of the interviews abroad. There's not enough people available in the UK, and I don't like remote interviews. I think they're not very good. And so, and also, I think there's bigger issues. We've got a managed decline of our society. We have a government debt which is ballooning. We have a failing NHS. We have corporate media that routinely lies. That's not conspiracy, it's provable. We live in a high-tax surveillance state. We have facial recognition cameras in London. I mean, we are very Orwellian. And so I just wanted to cover more subjects. So I spoke to my producer. Last trip we did to Nashville, I just said, look, I'm done. Let's move it to the UK. So we did. We've got a studio in Soho. And we wanted a rebrand, and like Elon Musk called me obnoxious on Twitter once, so I thought, okay, we'll be Mr. Obnoxious.
You are quite obnoxious on Twitter.
I don't know. I think I'm a nice person, but I just think if I'm quite blunt about the things I'm...
Sitting here you are, but if I didn't know you outside of Twitter, I think, God, he's really obnoxious, that guy.
I just like to call people out on their shit, and I think they think I'm obnoxious, but it's really a reflection of their shit.
Do you want to know a secret?
Go on.
And this might surprise most of you. I think only James knows this, but I'd actually invited, we were on the cusp of inviting, we were in talks with Craig Wright to attend today.
My old mate.
Your old mate. And but when we started talking, and when you finally replied, sorry, that's not a dick, you're a busy man, and we knew you were coming, it's like, great, I want Peter McCormack there. So we've had to...
You should have had us both here. That would have been hilarious.
I did not want to risk that.
If anyone doesn't know, I've been in a 5-year lawsuit with Craig Wright.
Yeah, and it got, if you've been following it on Twitter, I wouldn't say it got out of hand. It just got to the edge, didn't it?
I mean, I think if you're a career fraud and you're suing people and trying to destroy their lives based on your own delusions, I think that's got out of hand.
But fair play to you, because you stood up to the plate. There's so many people. There's a trail of people who got almost there and then bottled it because of the lawsuits. But you took it over the line.
I wouldn't confuse stupidity with bravery.
All right, so let's move on to 2022, right? And by then, you've done okay with Bitcoin and the podcast, and you decide to buy Bedford. How did that come about?
Yes, it's a good story. So I'm from Bedford. I love football. I think we're the largest town in the country that's never had a football team in the Football League, and I was confused as to why. So I thought I would look into this. It's quite simple, really. The football algorithm's very simple. It's about 70% your player wages, 20% the manager, and 10% luck. It's about that. So if you can't compete in the market with player wages, you will not compete. But if you don't have the manager who can manage those wages, you also will not compete. And you get the odd outlier. Leicester City winning the league was an outlier, and everybody loved it. But generally speaking, and if you rank a league based on wages next to that position they finish, most teams are within 5-6 positions of wages. So I looked and said, well, the only reason Bedford's never been there is never had the right business plan or somebody rich to do it. I'm not rich. So I was like, well, what's a business plan that can work? And I thought, well, there's a lot of crazy Bitcoiners around the world. If we create the Bitcoin team, they will get behind us. We'll have the Bitcoin companies sponsor us, and hopefully the Bitcoiners buy the merchandise, and maybe it'll work. And it kind of has. So we bought Bedford FC, who are in the 10th tier of English football. The goal is the Premier League, and everyone's laughed at me, and I'll explain that in a minute. Of course, because when you turn up, we had 40 people there.
I laughed.
Yeah,
because
everyone laughed.
we spoke in Christmas, it was Christmas of that year, and you said very brashly, very boldly, and I'm sorry, it was over a screen, which you hate, and you said, I'll take them to the Premier League. And I was stifling a chuckle.
I mean,
I'll be honest, but I'll tell you what, having seen what you've done, particularly last season, I'm signed up, I believe it.
I mean, anyone would be right to laugh at it because it's a ludicrous concept to take a team with 40 fans in the 10th tier with a decrepit stadium to the Premier League. But what I hadn't told anyone at the time is that I'd pitched the idea to Cameron and Tyler Winklevoss, who loved it. And so I had the backing of them and Gemini. And so for the last 2 years, I've been trying to prove the use case to them. So, and it's kind of worked. Look, we're in a fortunate position. I have a podcast with millions of listeners, so I get to go check out my football team. And, you know, I've galvanized the town and galvanized Bitcoiners. And so we've had this advantage in that, you know, our front of shirt sponsors Gemini, and we have all these Bitcoin companies backing us. And we've sold £250,000 of merchandise in 2 years, which, I mean, it's unheard of at this level. And so what that's meant is we can get a good manager and get good players and compete. And so to give you some perspective, the men's team, the 2 years we've done it, we've won back-to-back promotions, and we're top of the league in the third year. So we could potentially do a third one in a row. It'll be difficult. And then last year we started a ladies team, and they also won the league. They're second in the league this year. Back-to-back's harder with ladies because the divisions are smaller, and so you come up against big teams quicker. So we're in a league with QPR and Norwich, but we're going for it. We've won 7 trophies in 2 years. And we've also now had a round of investment from Cameron Tyler Winklevoss of $4.5 million. And so all the doubters are starting to go, okay, I can see the trajectory, I understand what you're trying to do, and yeah, it's kind of worked.
It's a remarkable plan. I mean, the one thing that I've always thought about when you've been doing it is, can this be replicated throughout the league and at every level? And I think it can, but then suddenly doesn't that create a flaw in your plan to get to the Premier League because every other bugger's doing it then?
Well, it can be replicated with different teams. There are different teams now with different models. So #United, run by Spencer Owen. Again, his model was media-based. Farnham, they've been bought by Hugo, I can't remember his surname. Again, he's bringing new ideas in. Wrexham was new ideas. Football's up there for disruption. There's a lot of old ideas, and it's almost a little bit commie at times. Like people were complaining about, you know, when our women won the league last year, there was a lot of complaints. Well, you've spent all that money on player wages, and our reply was, why are you not paying your women? They work for you. Why are you expecting them to work for free?
Bitcoin.
Yeah, well, yeah, and if you're upset about our business model because we're a profitable business, then you need to focus on your business model. That's the problem, not ours. You know, what do you want? Do you want us to not be successful? Do you want us to not spend money on people? Do you want us not to grow a business? Are you Labour voters? Sorry, I don't vote.
I knew he was going to throw me at some point. He's just
you hand grenades.
You mentioned something about community there as well, and you've said this a couple of times about galvanising the community. You're a Bedford lad. You want Bedford to be brilliant. You want the football team to be brilliant. But there's this community element as well. It's Bielsa-esque, isn't it, in some ways? How you're doing that?
I just like the town where I'm from, and it's been very good to me. I like the people, and it's very easy to move away and live in another city, but I think if you can have meaningful change in where you're from, it's a good thing. My mum, when she was 40, she retrained as a nurse. That's not a decision you make for money.
Yeah.
She did it because she wanted to work with children, and so she retrained as a nurse, and then she worked in the Children's Hospital in Bedford for the rest of until she retired at, I want to say, my dad was 61, so she would have been 59, and then within 8 years she died. So she focused the large percentage of the end of her life towards children, and she also worked in the community. There's a charity in Bedford called St Vincent de Paul. A lot of people at the moment like to blame migrants for their problems. My mum used to help migrants who came into Bedford with finding jobs and homes and furnishing their homes. So that's somebody who dedicated her life to the community. So I want to do the same. And so what can I do in my local town to help people?
And you've got the means to do it now with what you do with Bitcoin. Going back to the football club, how far through the club does Bitcoin permeate? Are you paying the players? What about the staff? How far?
Yeah, it's a really good question. So Bitcoin-only companies struggle when you see a high failure rate because Bitcoin is either feast or famine. And so I'm really interested in successful businesses which use Bitcoin as an accelerant. And so our football club, if you don't give a shit about Bitcoin, you can come along and buy a ticket, enjoy a game of football, have a beer and a burger and leave and not really care. But if you are a Bitcoiner and you want to buy your ticket in Bitcoin, you can. If you want to buy your beer or your burger in Bitcoin, you can. Once a month we have a meetup before a game, you can. We've paid one player once in Bitcoin previously, and it was one match. We've now got one guy every game this season wants paying in Bitcoin. They're all baby steps. Bitcoin is our identity, but it's not it's not the entirety of what we do. All our treasury investment from the Winklevoss has gone into Bitcoin, and it will stay there. We won't touch that for a decade, because as the world remonetizes in Bitcoin, that is going to possibly be an accelerant for us in a decade when we need that money. Obviously, it's very clear to me that fiat money is collapsing, and it's not just like Bitcoiners speak. Mathematically, it's collapsing. Steve Baker, the outgoing Conservative representative for High Wycombe, gave a really good interview where he said the welfare state will collapse within 20 years. The OBR just said national debt will triple within 50 years. Like, our currency is fucked. And it's not going to change as we live in a society where government thinks the two solutions are taxation and money printing, which is kind of theft and theft. Only until we go to I mean, look, everybody in here, right, let's just do the simple math. Everyone in here has an income, and from your income you pay your mortgage, and you pay your bills, and you maybe have a holiday, and maybe try and save some. And if you lose your job, you have to go into your savings, and you have to live within your means. If you don't, you lose your house. If you lose your house, you're either living back with your parents or on the street. But if any one of us had the ability to, if we needed a bit more money, to go all around to our neighbours and just take some, or go up to our bedroom and press, on the money printer, we would, because you could. Well, maybe not steal from your neighbours, but you know what I mean? Essentially, the way the government operates is different rules. They're economically incompetent, and so the way they deal with this is like, we're going to take more from you, or we're going to press the money printer, and we're going to socialise our stupidity. This has to end. It's not a conservative opinion or a left-wing opinion. This is a position of understanding mathematics and understanding that you only have to look at what's happening in Argentina, what's happening in Japan now. If you do not have a control of your currency, you do not have control of your national debt, you head for stagflation or inflation, and either way you impoverish the middle and lower class in society. This cannot continue. And so I don't even know where you started. I'm just having a rant now. I'm
just letting it go. It's like I've just caught a massive fish, the reel's screaming, the line's going, it's fine. I'm sorry, I'm a bit obsessed with football, I know that. But the fan reaction that you've had has been very good, hasn't it? It's
mainly.
Mainly, yeah. To replicate what you've done, in, I don't want to say a bigger club, but I'm going to say a club in the Championship, League One, League Two, the response would be very different, wouldn't it?
Well, I don't know. Look, as long as I want every football club in the world to adopt Bitcoin, but everyone who does, who's a bigger club than us, makes it harder for us. We have a competitive advantage. I know what I was ranting about, why we hold Bitcoin. The world is repricing in Bitcoin. Governments will only print more money. So us holding Bitcoin means we defend against that, but see the upside. Our $5 million of Bitcoin we have now, £3.8 million, whatever that is, who knows where that is in 10 years? It might be 7, it might be 15, it might be 25. Who knows? But if we do have, say, 25 million in Bitcoin in 10 years, and we are in League Two, we will be the most well-capitalized club in that division. Probably better capitalized than anyone in League One. Potentially a lot of the Championship. Most of these football clubs live on debt. We have no debt. And so other clubs could replicate this. I mean, it'd be very easy for a Man City to go and buy 1,000 Bitcoin, and we'll never catch them. And so, but I still think the large part of the world really doesn't understand two things: what Bitcoin is, and why it's the antidote to fiat currency.
Brilliant. I could sit here and talk with you for hours.
I could rant for hours.
I think we should do a podcast at some point. But I have to give way to the final panel of the day. So Peter McCormack, it's been an absolute pleasure. Thank you for coming along. Thank you.